about customer centricity? What do you think it kind of means? It's used a lot.
It is so overused, but I do think at the heart of customer centricity is genuinely putting your customer, or in a super funds example, the member, at the heart of everything that you do. As you're thinking about your products, your services, the experiences, the processes that you're creating, you are starting with, in the middle and at the end, really thinking about that customer. But that's easy to say. And the reason why I think it's really hard to do is that ultimately it has to be cultural and it has to be mindset. And if an organisation isn't truly set up culturally, then it just becomes something that's tacked on or done on the side, and it's never truly lived.
Yeah. It's almost natural for an organisation to have a product or process or internal orientation, isn't it? You almost have to fight against that constantly to infuse that customer piece in.
Totally. And that's why I bring up the fact that it's cultural, because everyone's got a job to do, right? And what happens, and where the breakdown happens, is you get stuck in your silo, or you get stuck in the job you think you've got to do. Yeah. And if it's not cultural, that the first thing, the second thing and the third thing that you think about is your customer or your member, then you'll just go about trying to do the very best at your job, but sort of forget the why you're here, which is your customer.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone just defaults to a bit of a process or a task orientation.
Correct.
You've got to be deliberate. Your point on mindset's really important too, because a lot of people can understand a process, but getting them to think differently is a lot harder.
It's
almost like finding natural pause points where we stop and reflect and consider customer and insight and think about their perspective deliberately to fight against that natural internal orientation. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And in fact, I mean, we ourselves, and look, I think there are very few organisations that are perfect at true customer centricity. And I would say, I would like to think we are one of the really good ones, but I would also say we're on a journey. So what we're doing at the moment is, with our big transformation pieces, we're putting all of the customer insights, what we've learned through customer complaints, incidents, issues, but also co-designed with members. And that really is at the heart of customer centricity. But what we're now trying to do is industrialise it so that everyone knows from the moment you walk in at Aware Super, the customer's at the heart of everything we do, and here's how you do things. And so that the first thing you do is get really clear what members really value and what is the member problem you're trying to solve. I think often people, to your point, get so stuck in a task or an outcome and they forget, what is the member or customer problem we're solving, and how do we stay true to that? So we're trying to industrialise that in everything we do at the moment.
So if you have a large, complex organisation like Aware Super, it's easy to say we want to deliver great value or great experiences for members. But how do you prioritise and optimise that? Some things matter, some things don't. Tell us a bit about that process.
It's a really great point, because I think you can mistake customer centricity, meaning we do everything that a member could possibly want or a customer could possibly want. And ultimately, that probably just ends up to bankruptcy. So I think really starting with who is your target segment and what do they most value. And as soon as you get really sharp about that, then that's what you want to be exceptional at, right? And then the things that are really important, but are probably important right across the market and are not your differentiators, you just want to be really good at. And the things that aren't important, and by the way, sometimes are really costly, they are the things that you might actually look for. Is there a way to actually change member behaviour or customer behaviour differently? Because ultimately that ends up giving more value back to focusing on the things that should prioritise, because that's what customers value. So
that customer behaviour and the trends are kind of interesting. I mean, how hard is it these days? I'm not guessing. I know that customer expectations are rising, and they're rising quicker than they've ever risen before. So as an organisation with such a large group of different customers with different expectations across generations, how hard is it to consistently keep up with technology and expectation and remove friction while innovating?
Oh, it's easy.
These are hard-hitting questions, aren't they?
No, it is really hard. And I think anyone that says, no, this is really easy
hasn't done it.
Hasn't done it, or they're lying. I think You're right. Both the expectations are rising and changing and evolving rapidly. And so it is not an easy task. But I do think at the heart of it, both is that cultural and value side that I said, because that actually means everyone in the organisation is focused on it, not just the customer design department or the market research or the marketing folk. Actually, it's everyone's responsibility, because so much happens in a large organisation that you can't possibly be across all of it. So it starts there in my mind. But it does mean you're also just actively listening constantly, both in a formal sense, whether that be you're surveying your members constantly, how was that experience? And then you're constantly building that into continuous improvement mindset and that sort of growth orientation. But I also love complaints, I have to say, because I think at the heart of a complaint is exactly where the friction is, exactly what's going wrong, where you've probably got an end-to-end process that's busted. It's rarely bad intent. It's often the fact that you've designed something poorly. So then the next thing for me is then making sure in everything you're designing, not just products and services, but processes. Processes are usually where companies get really unstuck because they're divided in an organisation. And so you might be really good at doing this in this department and really good at doing this and really good at doing that. Few think truly end to end. So as we're going through our whole digital transformation, we're actually designing our processes end to end with that totally in mind so that we're making it as frictionless as possible.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, there's that linkage, isn't there, between sort of the purpose, the strategic vision, but then getting the detail of what a great experience looks like in different settings.
Yeah.
And then you sort of talk about pushing that down through process, and it's almost an operating model alignment, isn't it, where you think about capabilities we need to execute that sort of experience.
Well, that's exactly how we're talking about it. We're talking about the fact we're doing a digital transformation, we're doing an operating model transformation, and we're doing a people transformation, because you can't do a digital transformation if you don't do a people transformation in terms of the mindset and what you're needing to do. And we're also doing all of that co-designed with our members, because ultimately, you know, you can't sit in a head office and you do not necessarily represent your member. Actually co-designing it is really helpful, because that really gives you the insight into what's busted in the end-to-end process, but also what they value the most.
Yeah. How do you manage the trade-offs between co-designing, because it's a great way to get that empathetic connection and use customer insight to build something appropriate, but also not sort of overdoing it or doing it everywhere? Because you know, often when you introduce design thinking into an organisation, everyone gets excited, and all of a sudden every project has customers and prototyping and interviews and research, and it's required sometimes, but you haven't got the resources to do it all the time. So how do you get that balance right?
You know what though, if you really know customer-centred design or human-centred design, at the heart of it is each of the elements of desirability, viability and feasibility. And people get really good at desirability. Oh, this seems really interesting.
That's an easy.
But actually, it's how quickly you shut stuff down. So you're just doing little elements. Is that working? Is that really valuable? Yes. Will that be feasible? Yes. Will that be viable? Yes. Or no, right? And often what happens is people fall in love with a concept. So that is definitely what happened. But I go back once again to being really clear what the segment or segments really value. And that's where the dollars, resources and attention gets focused on really good design.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to also be really disciplined in elements that actually add a huge amount of cost, but ultimately either create friction or don't add that amount of value. That is where you've either got to cut that out and be willing to cut that out, or indeed help shift customer behaviour. Service Centre is a really good example. You know, if I think about the amount of customers that call into a customer service centre, and that's just the easy way for them because they know the phone number, it's always how they've done it. But ultimately, it probably takes them more time, it's more costly, and ultimately, if you could take the friction out and it could just be done automatically, that's a much better outcome. So they're examples in a way where you've actually got to be willing to retrain, because it's not actually what they value. They don't really value calling up a call centre. They just think that's the way to do it because it's how they've always done it.
It's all about trade-offs and where your organisation is on the journey, right? Because in a superannuation environment, you also lack meaningful connection with members, true?
Yeah.
So on one side, we're taking out the friction and we're managing cost and we want to give them what they need so they don't have to call. But there's another part of your business that would say, no, we need to talk to them because we have limited contact compared to some businesses. So it's trying to make sure that when we do have that contact, it's high value, not routine. Is that how you think about it?
Well, it's so true. Superannuation is this really interesting thing where if you can imagine as a 21-year-old, 25-year-old, you're not
Overly.
necessarily overly, well, certainly if I look at my kids as they've just started their first jobs, they're not particularly excited about superannuation as much as their mum's trying to get them excited. That being said, those coming into and starting to get serious about their future and their retirement are highly engaged. Yeah. So I think it comes back to really thinking about what are the moments that really matter and how do you make sure that your service is both relevant and personalised in those really critical moments. That's at the heart of it. I don't think it's engaging them at every moment, at everything, because that actually is just white noise and probably likely to annoy them. But in those moments that really do matter, like a career change or like heading into retirement, you better have that very personalised and very relevant to what they need.
It's about having some adaptability and flex in the
Correct.
model, isn't it? Because you're so correct. I mean, that tipping point people go through where they go from largely disinterested to highly interested. If we can be there at that moment,
correct,
we decrease attrition risk and we deliver them amazing experiences. And they're also having those conversations with their friends because of that age group. So.
Well, and we're trying to do one thing before that as well, by the way, which we often hear from members. You know, I'm not the expert in finance. I'm not the expert in super. I want you to guide me and be proactive and tell me what I should be doing ahead of when I need it. Yeah. So the trick there is how to really make sure that you're nudging, helping, guiding to get them to do the things that are actually going to generate a much better future in their interest, but not do it so early that they're so disengaged or not do it in a way that is so generic that it's not really going to be relevant for them. So we're spending a lot of time, energy and dollars in really getting both the marketing technology right together with our digital transformation and really nailing those moments and personalising it so that what's right for you is not necessarily going to be right for someone else, but because of what we know about you or what you've been interested in and what you need to do next to create that best future, that's what we're designing. So I'm very excited. I don't think it's actually been done here in Australia before, so we're giving it a good crack.
that personalisation, that engagement is such a theme for the future, isn't it? I've often even thought that the same customer in the same segment might have certain attitudes and attributes, but their mindset can even be different day to day. So it's really about trying to meet them exactly where they're at.
Where they're at.
Yeah.